Welcome to the Menopause and Cancer podcast, where we speak with cancer patients, survivors, and incredible experts in their fields to help us find solutions to our symptoms and ideas to improve our health. My name is Danny Binnington, and I know that there are millions of cancer survivors out there really struggling with the effects of treatment-induced menopause. And I also know that we have thousands and thousands of healthcare professionals who are perplexed at knowing how best to help us. There is a huge gap. If you have had a gynecological cancer diagnosis, chances are that your treatment has pushed you into the menopause, and chances are that no one talked to you about the menopause are really high. Today, I'm joined by two incredible experts. Both of them have decades of experience of working with cancer patients. They're Tracie and Helen from a fantastic charity called the Eve Appeal. We'll tell you more about the Eve Appeal in a moment. They have a hotline, and you can reach out to nurses, Tracie and Helen, and you can ask them any of your questions. And many of the questions they do get are menopause-related questions from people that have had a gynecological cancer diagnosis. And so I wanted to bring them onto this conversation because I know they're a wealth of information. Together, we want to share with you the latest NICE guidance position statement on the management of the menopause. We're also going to share some other resources. Where can you go if you need to figure out how to manage your menopause? Helen will tell us that no one talked to her about the menopause when she was first diagnosed with womb cancer. There is so much to unpick in this conversation, regardless of what type of cancer you've been diagnosed with. If you're here, if you're listening to these conversations, I am assuming you've had little to no advice, and we want to change this today. Anything we're going to mention in this conversation, I'm going to link in the show notes here so that you can take that back to your doctors and your healthcare professionals, so that together we can do a much better job at making sure everyone gets the information and solutions they deserve and need. So now let's welcome Tracie and Helen into this conversation. Good morning, Helen, and hello, Tracie. How are you today? All good?
Thanks. Morning, Danny. How are you?
Very well. I'm really excited to get to speak to you amazing women today because we've been planning and plotting for a long time, haven't we?
We sure have.
We sure have. So I'd love for you to introduce yourselves personally, but also the amazing Eve Appeal that you're a part of. Helen, would you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start. Thanks, Danny. So my name's Helen. I'm a nurse and I manage the Ask Eve Nurse service for the Eve Appeal. So the Eve Appeal is the UK's Gynae cancer research charity. We're the only Gynae charity in the UK that covers all of the 5 gynae cancers. So that's cervical, ovarian, womb, vaginal, and vulval. So our main focus is on prevention and detection of these 5 gynae cancers. So as part of the Eve Appeal, we have our Ask Eve Nurse service, which both Tracie and I work on. And that service is a service that's available to anybody at all concerned about anything to do with their gynae health. So we take lots and lots of questions about a wide range of topics, questions, worries, anxieties. So that might be from women themselves, it might be from their friends, their partners, their loved ones, could be from healthcare professionals. And we get loads and loads of questions. So the types of questions that we get vary around signs and symptoms, about how to reduce the risk of developing a gynae cancer, about postmenopausal bleeding, cervical screening, itchy vulvas, lumps in the vagina, all sorts of things. Also, I think it's only fair to say that I live with an advanced womb cancer. So what we're going to talk about today is about menopause and HRT. And as part of my cancer journey, then I went through a surgical menopause very young. And you know, that's one of the questions that we get asked a lot. It's a massive fear for women, whether they're going through a risk-reducing surgery, which might put them into a surgical menopause, or whether they're diagnosed with a gynae cancer and need surgery and have their ovaries removed, which would then put them into a surgical menopause. And then we have women who are having treatments, so chemotherapy, radiotherapy, who then go into a more medical menopause. So there's lots of reasons why women contact us, and we're always open to talk to anybody about anything. But I'm going to hand over to Tracie now so she can introduce herself and then answer some more of these questions, talk through some of the questions that we get. Tracie.
Thank you so much, Helen. That's really lovely. And I really want to talk to you a little bit more about your personal experience and about all of the sort of amazing things we have spoken about before when we have met in real person. So thank
great.
you for being here today. It's great.
Oh,
Morning,
thank
Helen.
you for inviting us.
So hi there. So my name's Tracie and I'm a gynae cancer nurse specialist, have been in the NHS for, 25, 30 years. Latterly, the last 10 years, I've been specialising in genomics. So that's the genetics of cancer. So I add that into my what I call portfolio of knowledge. Think Angelina Jolie, yeah? Everybody in the BRCA gene, and that's where and then that gets us to that thought of risk-reducing surgery that Helen was talking about. We can expand on that a little bit more. So, and then I have the privilege to work with Helen at the Eve Appeal. So Helen runs Ask Eve, the free information service. It's confidential. And so when you get through to the service, you can be Eve or you can be Adam. We'll talk to the guys as well as the girls. Okay. No gender bias here at all, except we women are fat, aren't we? We're the only ones that menopause. There's a question on that, though, isn't there? Anyway, we might get to that if Danny's got time. So yes, we'll talk to Adam or Eve. And I work with Helen, so you'll only get through to myself or Helen if you have any questions. So if we've sparked your interest today, or if you want to get hold of us at any time, then please do feel to come to us at the Eve Appeal Ask Eve. So we thought, Danny, that it would be useful if we went through today some of the questions that we get around, or specifically around menopause and cancer, because we are a cancer research charity. And one of the things that comes off the top of my head, and then I'll get Helen to suggest something, and we'll ping pong backwards and forwards. And then if we've got time, my homework over the weekend was to read NG23. What am I talking about? NG23 is the number for the new NICE guidelines on menopause. And actually, they're pretty damn good. Now, I know Danny's had guests who've come and talked to her before, so we might be recapping something. So that's why we'll leave it to the end of our time with you today. But I did a little potted list of things that I thought were quite pertinent to people who are worried about cancer.
That's great. And Tracie, we can always link to any of the guidance in the show notes so people can do their own research, take them back to their own doctors, because we know what it's like, right? When I speak to people at our workshops, someone from Nottingham might have a very different experience to someone in Warwickshire, and their doctors have different knowledge about the menopause. What they've been taught is different. And so it's always really important that people go back to their doctors to have the conversation, because often it's the conversation that is lacking, isn't it? When I myself reached out to the Eve Appeal, it was before my oophorectomy. So I was planning my surgically onset menopause because I'm one of those BRCA carriers that you mentioned, Tracie, and I didn't know where else to go. And actually I was under very good care at the Royal Marsden Hospital, but there wasn't much talk about the menopause at all as a young person. And you were the only ones. And I really, really valued so much of the research you're putting into all of this. And there was an amazing guy, Dr. Martin Witschwenter, who was still at University College London Hospital, and he performed my oophorectomy. And I know he's a real supporter, and you fund a lot of his research projects. So the work you do is amazing in terms of the research, but then also providing the conversation to the people with all of the questions like I have had. Tracie, what are some of those questions? Like, I know what mine were, but what are some of the questions that you get on when people ring you?
That's a perfect segue into one of the questions that we often get, which is about the risk-reducing surgery. So as you say, we're a research charity. And one of the things that women like yourself, the questions that you're asking in your lived experience was, so I'm going to have this menopause that's going to start on Monday because that's when my surgery is. How do I look after myself? Can I take HRT straight away? Should I take HRT straight away? that's one of the big questions that Helen and I get in. And these women may be having a oophorectomy, their ovaries removed. They may be having an oophorectomy and a hysterectomy, which immediately puts a different sort of situation for them. And I'll explain why in a moment. Or they may be wondering whether or not to go through that risk-reducing surgery because they don't want to go into that early menopause. So just with the segue into the research side of things, and this is for your, I was going to say listeners, watchers, your people, your village. So there is a trial called the Protector trial that we support, which is a trial where there are, for women who are concerned about going into menopause, actually there is a choice where they can have their fallopian tubes removed first, not go into menopause, and then continue with the risk-reducing surgery and have their ovaries removed. But enough of a segue into research. So just whilst we're sort of rounding up on that one, because I know we don't have too much time, really important for that woman that's thinking, can I take HRT? Should I take HRT? The question, just as you did, Danny, should be asked before the surgery. The answers should be there before the surgery, not at that post-anaesthetic, feeling groggy, have I done the right thing, relieved that it's over, and then going into that void of, oh my goodness, I'm going into the whatever she may experience. It may be hot flushes, it may not, it may be changing cognition, it may be a dry vagina straight away, it may not. It may be simple, just fear of getting any of those symptoms. And so it's really important to plan ahead of time. And if she's having her womb removed as well in risk-reducing surgery, then she may only need to take estrogen on its own. She doesn't need to take progesterone. I'll just explain this one, and then I'm going to get Helen to quiz me with something else, or you, Danny. So when we're talking about HRT, hormone replacement therapy, to the people that call in, Adam and Eve, we talk about 3 hormones. Most people just think estrogen. That's that feel-good, blooming marvellous for those women that have been pregnant. That's that feel-good one. That's the one that makes us all look stunning. I've got an estrogen button on my teens, actually, that gets rid of some of the wrinkles. It's great. It's a sort of fade out of the wrinkles. But estrogen is the thing that helps to plump our skin up and make us feel really, really good. Then there's progesterone. Progesterone is the hormone that for some women make us feel a bit irritable and grotty and bloated. And then there's testosterone, which doesn't just belong to the Adams, it belongs to Eve as well. And that also can help for some women with libido. That's something I'd really like to talk to people about a bit later on. But actually, if we take estrogen, especially in the gynae world, we really have our head fixed on this, Helen and I. If a woman takes estrogen, we always tell her if she still has a uterus, a womb, means the same thing, then she must have progesterone, because estrogen on its own, so this is the woman that's having risk-reducing surgery and not having her womb removed, which is likely, she's not likely to have her womb removed as part of risk-reducing surgery, must have progesterone to kind of balance out the estrogen is the way to think of it, because otherwise estrogen on its own can promote the potential of a womb cancer. So that's the kind of risk-reducing surgery in a nutshell, and I'm going to let you guys say something else. We'll go off down another.
You said something so important, and is that in an ideal world, women are prepared before their surgery of how to manage menopause afterwards. We, as a not-for-profit organization on the other end, who everyone comes to us once they already are in the menopause after a cancer diagnosis, we see a very small percentage that has been adequately prepared. Less than 10% of all the people in our community, and we're thinking 200,000 people that have listened to these podcast conversations, have told us anyone spoke to them about what's to come. And that's really sad. And most people have had a cancer diagnosis, and we know the main focus is on treating the cancer, is the cancer treatment. And so, of course, menopause and hormones and all of that is secondary initially. But it's so important we get it right, because it takes an average of 2 years, we hear from all of the people that aren't contraindicated to having their hormones back, to get their hormones back. And it's 2 or 4 years. Helen, how was it for you? Because I understand it from all sides. I know initially when we get a cancer diagnosis, I didn't care about my hormones. I couldn't care any less. I just wanted to get on with treatment. You are continuously on treatment, Helen, but if you think back to when you were first diagnosed, was the menopause and hormone mentioned or not?
No, not at all. It was never mentioned. There was just no mention of it to me at all. So, as being a woman who wasn't even perimenopausal, so had no symptoms whatsoever, it was a real shock to me when literally 24, 48 hours after my surgery, I started having really severe hot flushes. I wondered what was going on. I had no idea. And it was only through my own reading that, because I was thinking, I honestly thought, even as a nurse, have I got an infection? Is that what's going on? What's happening? I must have an infection. This isn't right. I'm having night sweats. Is that because of the cancer? And actually, I actually Googled, as you're not supposed to do, and found out, as we advise everybody not to do, and found out, wow, this is a surgical menopause. And it must have been, no joking, probably about 9-10 months after, when someone actually said to me, it was my GP at the time, actually said to me, how are you managing with the menopause? And that was the first conversation. That was the first time that word had ever been mentioned to me.
Yeah.
So it's just, and I think it's so important, isn't it? Because it's, as Tracie said, those conversations should happen before. And what we both say to women now, women who, as Tracie says, having risk-reducing surgery or who are going to go through a surgical menopause, when we have those conversations with them before they're having their surgery, and a lot of women have such severe anxiety, understandably, about surgical menopause because they've heard it's worse than a natural menopause. And everybody's menopause is different, whether you have a surgical menopause, whether you have a medical menopause, whether you have a natural menopause. They're all very different, and because everybody's individual. But what we always say to women is, make sure you ask these questions. And if there is a menopause clinic, a specialist menopause clinic in your area, ask for that referral to be put in now. So you've got that support after your surgery if you need it. And if you don't, that's fine. But it's so important. And women aren't aware that those services are available for them, but that's exactly what they're there for.
And I hope anyone out there in the future Googling at 3:00 in the morning, because they haven't had advice, they'll come across this. Then they'll come across the Eva pill, then they can pick up their phone and ring you and talk it through and plan their next steps, because most of us have our own awakenings. Oh, this is the menopause suddenly. And then you go a little bit wild, don't you, on the online web. And depending on who you are as a person, you're going to find what resonates with you. And I think that's the main issue, is the people that want to then go through a natural menopause, whatever that means. And Tracie, I'll ask you, because I think you may have gone through a natural menopause. They think, do I need to manage this naturally? Maybe with, I don't know, diet and exercise, but what is it and what are my options? So Helen, just before I ask Tracie, when your GP then asked you how you're managing with the menopause, where did it take you, that conversation?
Nowhere.
Oh.
Nowhere. It didn't take, and that's the thing. So I said to her, you are the first person that's mentioned that to me. So I said, the main thing for me is the night sweats, the hot flushes at night. And she was typing away on her computer, and she turned to me and she looked at me and she carried on, and she said, oh, and that was it. There was no conversation. There was no, have you thought about this? Have you got any other symptoms? There was nothing, absolutely nothing. So I think that's, for me, that's one of the reasons that I am so passionate about making sure women get the right support, because the support is there. It's not something that people at whatever stage of their life they go through this, for whatever reason, have to manage on their own. There are so many options available. And, even for those women who are afraid of developing cancer from HRT, because, that there's these misconceptions around, you know, or for women who choose not to take HRT for other reasons. There's so much available for them.
Thank you so much for sharing that. So Tracie, let's talk about a natural menopause versus perhaps a menopause after a cancer diagnosis. What
So
about you? What's your thoughts on there?
So I'm 62 and I had a natural menopause. In other words, it wasn't induced by surgery or chemotherapy, and my cognition's pretty good. I'll tell you why. I've got a secret weapon, and I don't remember feeling anything like Helen did when I went to the GP, because I simply went to the GP and said, please, can I have HRT? Because I'm getting the same as Helen, the night sweats. However, and here's a nugget, and now you would not, Helen is my best friend, but there is no way I would let her have my estrogen patches. They are my best friend. And I have a Mirena coil, which is my uterus's best friend, to make sure that the estrogen doesn't promote a cancer. But here's an interesting nugget. I would suggest that I know a fair amount about cancer, having been in the gynae cancer world, and the hormonal influences of cancer. And yet it took me a couple of years. I would actually describe it to pluck up the courage to actually ask for the HRT, because I was a little bit worried about those hormones. Now, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
So women who really aren't sure, well, is it good, is it bad? Because you hear that, oh, it's hormones, it's bad for you. That is also, anybody listening, potentially your GP. The GP like Helen's GP, who was sat at the screen thinking, oh, God, hormones, girl with cancer, not sure. Or Danny's GP might have been girl whose ovaries been removed, but removed so she didn't get cancer, not sure. And they are often in the same situation. I am not GP bashing or defending, but I think that's something we women and the Adams out there looking after those women need to remember. So can I suggest a really good thing to do? This new NG23, this NICE guidelines, if you put that into your Google browser, and I think Danny can share stuff with people later, on pages, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget, on pages 26 to 41, there is a great table. It's a table of all sorts of different conditions, health conditions, and the risks and benefits of HRT. So you can read that for yourself, and then you can take that to your GP. Power and knowledge in that sense. So Danny, that was me. Yes, I'm menopause naturally. Hot sweats were the worst. Took me a while to get my emotional brain to meet my intellectual brain. Started HRT. Boom, life is so much better. My vagina is not dry. It was. My hot flushes pretty much went. My night sweats, not bad. I'm still hot stuff. But yeah, you know, it's so much better. And I certainly wouldn't stop my HRT now.
There are a couple of things I want to pick up on. My biggest frustration and why I set up the organization is, unless we tell women this is going to happen to you, most likely the menopause is going to happen, we give this person no chance to get adequate help and support, right? So because if we don't know, we cannot go out and advocate for ourselves and get the help we deserve and need, not just for our symptoms, but our long-term health as well. Bones and brain and heart health and all of the other beautiful stuff that comes with. And to me, it's never about HRT or not HRT, because even if you can't have HRT, you can do other things about your sweats, right? So it's just negligence that we don't give this person options. Like, I really disagree with people walking around with fans, because we have much better strategies than fans and lovely bedding, but they're helpful additions to someone's bigger toolkit, right? We don't want to undermine small lifestyle hacks that we can make, but there are really good strategies for hot sweats, whether they're hormonal or non-hormonal. So Helen, how long did it take you then to understand, is HRT for me or not? Because maybe this is the first question, isn't it, for a patient? I'm struggling with the menopause. I've had a history of cancer. The first question needs to be, is HRT appropriate for you, given your particular history? And we're more than our cancer, because you might have an autoimmune disease on top of everything else.
Yeah.
Did you ever have this good conversation with maybe your oncologist further down the line about how to manage your menopause then?
No, absolutely not. I've never had a conversation with my oncology team about menopause, with my consultant, with my clinical nurse specialist, nothing. And then I did change GP for other reasons. And my new GP is very much into the menopause. And she did ask me about it, and she signposted me to some information. I think bearing in mind that at that point, this is, a good couple of years down the line. So I've already done all my reading. I've already got strategies in place to manage it. But I think, the fact that she actually listened, asked the question and listened, and then gave some information really made me think, wow, this would have been really helpful to me. And it was helpful to me because I did go away and look at what she said. But that would have been really helpful in the initial stages.
Yeah. So Tracie, if someone rings you and they say, I've had a history of cancer, I'm now in the menopause, I've no idea what my options are, I don't know if I can have HRT or not, what do you suggest that woman does?
So, first of all, I congratulate her for getting in touch, but not in a sycophantic way. That just kind of like, really pleased you got in touch. I remind her that menopause is not a disease. She's been through cancer, which is a disease. Menopause is a natural state. Eventually, it's in her. She's acquired hers because she's had surgery. It's likely, or chemotherapy. So the first tip that I give her is I say, so do you know? So if she's had, if it's a hysterectomy that she's had for a uterine womb cancer, then I'll ask her, do you know if your cancer was estrogen receptor positive? I'll explain to her how to find out. So that's when she gets her results, her histology result, we call it. So that would be the result that initially told her that she had a cancer. On that result, we'll tell her whether she's ER or PR, estrogen receptor, or progesterone receptor positive. The same stands for breast cancer. So ER, estrogen receptor, that's the culprit. That's when doctors naturally need to consider whether or not, naturally is not the right word, is it? I've got natural from the hen, menopause, natural. But that's when the doctors will consider with the patient whether or not HRT is the right thing to do. So it's the estrogen that we're concerned about, estrogen receptors. So if she doesn't have an estrogen receptor positive cancer, so the nastiest breast ones, all breast cancer is nasty, but the nastiest one is, one of the nastiest ones is triple negative. That's not going to stop her from having HRT, for example. If her womb cancer is not estrogen receptor positive, then she's likely to be able to take HRT. So that's the first thing she needs to find out. And Helen and I will guide her as to how to ask the GP. It's just looking up on her records. So that gives her a head start, makes her informed. Even if she is ER positive, estrogen receptor positive, that does not rule out HRT completely, because there's a sort of like a scale of, low to high estrogen receptor positivity. And there will be a scale of how she is feeling with her menopausal symptoms. And that's where the menopause specialist comes in. Yeah. There aren't enough of them, but it is a growing amount of doctors that are interested in HRT. And we do have menopause clinics that are affiliated with some cancer centres around the country. And if women aren't sure how to find them, we always say, check in with Helen and I, and we'll have a look for them, because they're in different areas of the country, but they are becoming increasing. So the first thing is to find out, basically, Danny, is she ER positive? Is it estrogen receptor positive? And that starts that understanding of why HRT may be useful or may not.
Because it is interesting, isn't it, Helen? You think, I had the triple negative breast cancer, Tracie, for example, and then I had a risk-reducing surgery. And before my surgery, my periods had come back. So I'd lost my period during chemotherapy. I had no idea I was in the menopause, temporary menopause. I just thought, how I'm going to lose my hair, lost my periods. No one said it was the menopause. I was poorly educated about women's health because I didn't have a Scooby-Doo. Then I had periods again for over 3 years. And then when I inquired about, can I have HRT once I let go of my ovaries, everyone said absolutely no. because I had had breast cancer. And so everyone just put me into the breast cancer. And I kept saying to doctors, but I've been having periods for the last 3 years and you didn't take those away from me. So why can't I then have a bit of HRT back just because I have my ovaries out? So it's so frustrating when everyone's put into boxes. And I know from our gynecological cancer community, they're all shoved into a box as well. They're all just shoved into, oh, it's gynae cancer. Well, no, it's not. There are 5 different types and there are subtypes within all of those, right? And so I do believe, like you say, it needs specialist care. But I also know that the general practitioner can do a lot for us in the meantime, or maybe they can refer us, isn't it? So Helen, how can we sort of look for a referral after a gynecological cancer? So if we don't have the conversation with the oncologist, like in your case, who could refer us, or who could we ask, or how do we get on the list for one?
Yeah, so I mean, we would always say to raise it with your oncologist. So what we say to women is, before you go into your consultation, we will talk them through, because quite often women ring us and say, I've got an appointment. Are there any questions that I should be asking? Is there anything I should be,
Yes.
raising with them? So we'll explain to them, we'll go through with them and go through some questions. And one of the questions would then be, I've got these symptoms. How can you support me? Do you have a menopause clinic? Is it possible you could make a referral? So that's if you're with your oncologist. For those women who've maybe had an earlier stage cancer, who are no longer seeing their oncologist or don't feel that they have that relationship, because sometimes women find it hard to speak to their oncologist or their CNS for lots of different reasons, we would always signpost them to them in the first instance. If not, we would really encourage them to have a chat with their GP to write down all the symptoms that they're experiencing, the impact that these symptoms are having on their life, and also what is it that they want. So what do they want from that GP? So, do they want them to be able to chat through, as Tracie was saying, the NG23, the NICE guidance? Do they want them to chat through? Do they want to go to the GP and say, look, I've had a look at these. This is what's available to me. Is this something that you feel would be helpful for me, and would you be happy to prescribe it? So that's the first thing. And if not, then how can you support me? So what can the GP do to support the woman to get the help and support that she needs? Can they then say, they can say to their GP, okay, would you be happy then to refer me for some specialist support, because this is having a big impact on my life? And that's how we would approach that conversation with that woman. So it's about empowering her and giving her the tools and the skills and the knowledge to be able to feel confident to go to her GP or her oncologist or her CNS and saying, this is impacting on me. What can you do to support me? This is what I want. Will you facilitate that for me? So it's all about empowering that woman.
Thank you so much, Helen, because sometimes I have sat in front of my own GP and I didn't know what to ask for. And then you do walk away with nothing, because you kind of, like you say, you need to help them a bit. Like, talk me through my non-hormonal options, for example, for hot flushes.
Absolutely.
Or what can I do? Where can I find out more information about HRT? So it's important to say what we want, but when we're not prepared, we don't know what we want, isn't it? Like you.
And it's about, so what we do is we sort of almost go through like a mock consultation with them almost. So we sort of talk through with them, these are the things that, write everything down so you don't forget. Because when you go, we all know, we're all patients. You go to a GP and the minute you're in the room, you forget everything that's been going through your mind. So that consultation is about you, and you want to come out of that room feeling that all those issues that you're concerned about have been addressed. And what we say to women is, these are the things that you need to say. These are the questions that you're likely to be asked. These are some of the answers. These are your options. And this is the outcome that you're looking for. And this is how you have that conversation. So they go in feeling that they, as I say, empowered, confident, and they've got a structured conversation with a very clear outcome that's right for them.
Thank you. Tracie, earlier you mentioned the updated NICE guidance, which we want to link to. The British Gynaecological Cancer Society has also updated their guidance. Is this something new? Have they done this before? Talk me through that. It's in conjunction with the British Menopause Society, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So I'm a member of the British Gynae Cancer Society. So that's a multidisciplinary team member. And so is Helen, actually, by proxy, because and rightly so. The BGCS actually affiliate with all the charities, so that's really, really important. So yes, this is new, and it's about keeping ourselves updated, because our knowledge changes and our opinions on HRT, for example, in this instance, change. And so those NICE guidelines were really, really important in that they have been updated where there isn't a phenomenal amount of new evidence out there, I have to be honest. But what has happened is the evidence has been looked at with fresh eyes and with more knowledge. And so I was looking, there have been about 20 trials that have been looked at, so that we can actually, with more confidence, prescribe for those women who have had breast cancer, like yourself, Danny, and consider women like yourself, Helen, with a womb cancer for taking HRT. One of the things that we also talk about at the BGCS, and I think this is a really top tip for women, is actually, I was talking about that GP that's not sure, which both of you have experienced in that sense. Okay. So let's assume the GP is almost as in the dark as you guys were when you were talking to them, not GP bashing again. How could you as patients in your individual rights actually help your GP? How about, and this is what the BGCS has been talking about, how about when you are being a patient, I know it's hideous being a patient, well, I don't know what it's like, you two have been through it, but actually asking your nurse specialist or your consultant, whoever you have a relationship within the team, could you please write in my discharge summary, the discharge summary that goes to the GP, this is Danny, it was triple negative. Please feel free to give her estrogen. Boom, in the GP letter, you've got it there, it's official. This is Helen. We're not quite sure here at why, and giving the reason why around the histology, for example. And therefore, Helen has got a conversation starter. But actually, the person that started the conversation was you two of patients in this example. I hope I'm not being too personal. We have shared, so it's important. So actually, it gives you that information as you're leaving. And it's in your discharge summary, because we know as wonderful as the NHS is, or whether or not you're going into, if you've got insurance and you're able to go privately, however it rolls, communication is key. And one of the things that Helen and I see so much is that actually the updated guidance, for example, the NG23 doesn't get to the GP for ages because there's too many other things that come on the computer. So that's an idea going forward, because NG23 is actually giving a lot more liberation, I would say, for the GP or the oncologist to prescribe for women who have experienced breast cancer. It's giving a lot more liberation for the woman who's had a womb cancer, or for the GP who's prescribing, to, depending on that level of estrogen positivity, to make an informed decision with a patient. So those would be my top tips. Speak to your clinician. Now, that's easy for me to say, because as you were both saying, you're in the throes of going through surgery, etc., etc. So that's in that pre-surgery, talking to your oncologist and saying, right, could we write this down now? Yeah.
I love that, because we're always paying it forward, because everyone listening to our conversations usually been affected by the cancer and the menopause already. But there are so many people in each of our surroundings that are about to go through it. And I think together we can really pave the way, and we'll definitely link to all of the resources, because many of our listeners have taken guidances to their doctors, to their GPs, to discuss with their oncologist. And like you say, Tracie, we're all here educating one another, because one of the most important things we have to do is speak about our experiences and say how difficult it is, so that the medical professionals can go, oh, okay, this is actually a big thing for women. And then we can influence research, which is, I know what you're so passionate about at the Eva Peel, isn't it? So that we can sort of really complete that cycle of supporting women, but also changing research, which is so desperately needed for women. I know we're running out of time, because both of you are very busy ladies, and I've only got a couple more minutes left with you. Helen, just tell me, how do people phone you? How can they ring you? What's the number? Or how do we do that when not you personally, but ask Eve?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So people can contact us in one of three ways. So they can go onto our website, where we've got an online contact form. and they can submit a contact through there. They can email us on nurse@evapeel.org.uk, or we've got a free phone helpline number, which is 0808 802 0019. They can leave a message on that, and we will get back to them. You know, we would encourage women, you know, we are very, very happy to chat to anyone about anything gynae related. There is nothing silly. There is no question too small. You know, nothing that we've not heard before. You'd be surprised at what we have heard, trust me. But, you know, we are always here. So, you know, please do get in touch if you've got any queries at all. Always very happy to speak to you.
Thank you. Anything to add from you, Tracie?
Just look forward to hearing from any Adam or Eve who wants to call in. And I've a feeling, Helen, that we've got a bit of a project coming up. How about we create that draft letter paragraph that we write to ask our oncologist, or as we're packing and getting ready to go in for our cancer surgery, our risk-reducing surgery, so that we can produce it, so that we've got it for our GP post-op. Just a thought.
That would be amazing. We can get that up on the websites as a PDF to download for people to then fill in their own. Oh, I love that idea. Tracie,
Teamwork.
Amazing. Teamwork makes the dream work.
We will do that.
Tracie, can you send me the nice guidance so I can put that into the show notes now?
Will do.
Helen, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure to talk to you today. And yeah, amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny. It's been amazing. We've loved it, haven't we, Trace?
We have. Thanks for being there, Danny.
Yeah, thanks so much for everything you do, Danny. See you soon.
Thank you. Gosh, I'm so inspired. Every time I speak to Helen and Tracie, I think, wow, they're amazing. I want to be just like them one day in being able to provide really great support to so many people for years and years and years and decades. And they are a real inspiration to me personally. The EVA pill, as I've mentioned in the conversation, has helped me personally to try and figure out what my next steps could be in how to manage my menopause after cancer, but it'll be different for all of us. You might have had help from your doctors. You may be totally sitting in the dark. You might be a few years on, or you might have just woken up to the fact that menopause is a big thing for you, and you're now trying to piece together a little bit of an action plan. Reach out to Ask Eve, have a look at all of the fantastic resources of the EVA pill, and I really hope this conversation has been helpful for you, and pay the favor forward. So if anyone in your surrounding has been affected by any type of gynecological cancer, then do tell them about the EVA pill, and do tell them about our podcast here, so they can go on their own learning and seeing how their sort of next steps could unfold for them. From me to you, I wish you all the best. Thank you for listening. I'll be back next week. I know these conversations are very action-packed sometimes, and we want to provide so much help and support, but sometimes you just let it all be, and I think your next steps will sort of uncover quite naturally. So if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed at the moment, then I think that's really, really normal too. You're trying to come to many answers, and it's quite difficult, and things take time. A bit like Tracie said, it took 2 years of her own time in managing or trying to figure out how to manage a natural menopause transition. And so please know these things take time. Even reaching out to your doctor sometimes can take weeks, can't it? And so take it at your own pace and do as much or as little as you need. And I'll speak to you on next week's conversation.